I just played What Remains of Edith Finch for the first time, and it's the best horror game that isn't a horror game. I'm kind of spooked. This isn't a spooky game, is it? I was kind of like in the vibe of like Resident Evil 7, but I'm glad that is not the case. Man, this game makes me so uncomfortable. What Remains of Edith Finch is one of the first games that I heard about when I started this new format. It was always on the list of short games you can beat in one sitting, and yet I never really made it a priority. I mean, I didn't know anything about it, like nothing. I didn't know if it was a horror game, a walking simulator, or even a top-down shooter. I just knew it was short, it was narrative, and people seemed to like it. So when I finally sat down to play it, I went in completely blind. And that made it way more fun because, well, for the first 30 minutes, I was constantly on edge, wondering what the hell kind of game this even was. But let's back up first. The game doesn't even warm you up. There's no menu, no big title screen, nothing. You're in it. You see the words, "What Remains of Edith Finch?" You move your mouse and boom, you're looking around. That's gameplay. You're walking through the woods with a journal, already hearing Edith narrate, and before you even realize it, the story is happening. And right away, the tone is weirdly unsettling. The Finch house in the distance is looming and crooked, like something out of a fairy tale, or a haunted house. You've got this key you don't know what to do with, and the path just kind of pushes you towards the property. And because I knew nothing about this game, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so is this about to turn into Resident Evil 7? Am I about to get jump scared by a ghoul grandma? Because I swear if that happens, I'll die. It's a creepy vibe for sure. Not outright scary, but it's got that quiet tension. The kind where you don't know what the rules are yet, so you're bracing for something bad. And then when you get up close, the game messes with you even more. The front door doesn't open, so you're circling the house and you end up crawling in through the doggy door like some sort of trespassing burglar. And at that point, I'm fully convinced I'm in a horror game. Once you're inside, the game keeps messing with you. The place is cluttered, full of books and knickknacks, doors sealed shut with planks, and these little peepholes drilled into the wood. And I'm standing there, mouse hovering, thinking, do I really want to look through this? No, I didn't, but I did anyways. I peeked, and the whole time I'm literally begging out loud, please, no jump scare, no sudden movement, just let it be a normal room. Because the vibes are still off, right? The house is too quiet, too still, and I'm still waiting for something creepy to happen. After just one peephole, I was like, nope, I'm done. No more peepholes. If there's something spooky in there, I don't want to be the one to find it. So I pushed on, deeper into the house, hoping for answers instead of jump scares. The door that's unlocked is Walter's, and from there you find this little crawl space, and that's where the key finally fits. You use it, and it opens up into a little girl's room. Molly's room. It's frozen in time just like the rest of the house, and on her dresser is this journal, and the second you start reading it, things get weird. Molly's writing about how she was sent to bed without dinner, and she's starving. And immediately, I'm already uncomfortable because she starts eating things that she shouldn't be eating, like her gerbil's food, toothpaste, berries off a random plant, and I'm just sitting there going, please no, oh god. It's off-putting in the best way because it doesn't feel like a kid's thought process. It feels like gluttony, one of the 7 deadly sins. And then it escalates. Suddenly you're a cat stalking a bird across the roof and treetops, which is odd enough, but after you catch it, you're an owl swooping down on rabbits, and the way you grab them and swallow them is more gruesome than I expected. It's not graphic, but it's the implication that got me. And then you're a shark, rolling helplessly down a hill, flopping into the ocean, chasing seals, biting into them. At this point I'm thinking, okay, this is getting bizarre, but sure, let's roll with it. And then the game hits you with the Lovecraftian sea monster. Tentacles, shadows, swallowing sailors whole. And that's when I had this moment of realization that this is definitely a horror game. Because it's unsettling in a completely different way. There aren't jump scares, no gore, just this creeping, surreal sense that you're trapped in a child's nightmare. One that spirals darker and darker until it ends with Molly claiming that the monster came for her. That sequence left me a little rattled. It was strange, it was uncomfortable, and it set the tone that this game was going to keep throwing curveballs at me. After that, you move on into Odin's room. His story is told through this old slide viewer, like a Viewmaster. It's quick. Basically, he's the one that brought the Finch house over from Norway, built the original house, and it literally sank into the ocean. It's the game's way of planting the seed of so-called Finch family curse. It's short, it's simple, it's a bit of backstory that sets everything else up. The next room you go into is Calvin's. He's one of the Finch twins, and his room is basically a little astronaut shrine. You find out that he was obsessed with space, flying, the idea of escape. And his story plays out on a swing set perched at the edge of a cliff. The mechanic is simple. You're swinging back and forth, higher and higher, until eventually you're looping all the way over the tree and you launch straight out into the ocean. I'm not gonna lie, this one actually made me laugh. Not because it's supposed to be funny, but because the execution is so over the top, it's absurd. This kid just swings himself, and yet at the same time, it's fitting. He got exactly what he wanted to fly. Short, simple, a little silly. That's Calvin. Now, Barbara's story is where things start to get really interesting. She was one of the older Finches, and her whole identity was tied to being a child star, a scream queen from old horror movies. By the time we see her room, though, her fame has long since faded. And the way the game tells her story is through a comic book, a literal EC Comics style horror issue, complete with cheesy narration and spooky Halloween theme music. Mechanically, this section is brilliant. The panels come to life, you're moving Barbara around in a pulpy horror story, and it's constantly blurring the lines between her reality and the sensationalized version of it. The plot of the comic has her home alone with her little brother Walter and her boyfriend, who ends up ditching her, and then she is attacked by a group of troublemakers. It's campy, but the game plays it straight. You're fighting off these intruders, all while waiting for the twist. And the twist is the reveal. It ends with the line, "All they found was her ear." That's it. That's what remains of Barbara. And I sat there like, wait, what? That's horrifying, but also so ambiguous. Did she actually get murdered by strangers? Was she a victim of her own washed-up fame? Or is this just the family mythologizing her into a spooky bedtime story? This is one of my favorite sections, not just because of the comic book aesthetic, but because it nails the theme of unreliable storytelling. Barbara isn't remembered as a person anymore, she's remembered as a campfire story, an urban legend, a punchline. And then, right after Barbara's room, you drop down into Walter's section. Again, Walter was Barbara's little brother, and after her death, he basically sealed himself away in the basement. For decades. His story is framed around his daily routine, waking up, eating canned peaches, and hiding from the so-called family curse. Eventually, he decides to leave. He digs his way out of the bunker, and for a brief moment, there's this sense of hope. And then, bam. He steps onto the train tracks outside and gets hit. And here's the part that really threw me. The train tracks don't even connect anywhere. You're on an island. So, was it a real train? Or just the story again filling in the blanks however it wants? Walter's story is tragic, but also confusing in a way that makes you wonder if any of these stories are literal at all. Maybe the curse isn't about what happened, it's about how the family remembers what happened. Quick pause before we go on. I stream a short game every Monday at 10 a.m. Central, and every Friday I put out a video like this one. Part review, part retrospective, part overthinking. I may be a small-time YouTuber, but I put in full-time hours every week. So if you're enjoying this, a like, a comment, or even a subscription really helps. And next week, I'm finally playing Undertale for its 10-year anniversary. Back to the video. Next is Sam. Sam was Edith's grandfather, and his whole vibe is outdoorsman, hunter, survivalist dad. His story is told through a series of photographs, which you literally take with a camera as the scene unfolds. And I thought this mechanic was really innovative. Instead of just watching a memory, you're framing it, clicking the shutter, like you're helping to preserve the story yourself. Like if Pokemon Snap stitched together your shots into a story. It's a father-daughter hunting trip, teaching her how to shoot, bonding in that kind of tough love, this will make you stronger kind of thing. And then, of course, it ends in classic Finch fashion. Sam gets bucked off a cliff by a deer he thought had already died. It's tragic, sure, but I couldn't help but laugh again. Not because I didn't care, but because the execution was so ridiculous. Like, your daughter is actively against this entire situation and warns you that the deer is still alive, but you're so obsessed with taking the picture that nothing else matters. I'll come back to this thought later. Still, it's a cool section, and the camera mechanic makes it one of the more unique stories. And then there's Gregory. Oh boy, this one is rough. Gregory was Sam's son, just a baby when he died. His story is framed through divorce papers, and you're suddenly in Gregory's head in the bathtub. The music kicks in, it's whimsical, playful, and you're controlling a little frog, bouncing around the bath toys. It feels like a minigame, light and joyful. And then the toys start to come alive. Gregory is laughing, playing, splashing, and it's magical. Until you realize what's actually happening. And he drowns. And the game doesn't comment on it afterwards. It doesn't cut back with a character reflection or even a pause. It just moves on. I was angry with this one. The dad says in the papers to the mom who is supposed to be watching him that it's not her fault and that she tried everything she could. Lamau, no, it is her fault. You don't leave a baby unattended in a bath. That's neglect. And it's brutal because Gregory's perspective is pure joy, but we as the players know the reality. It's one of the most devastating moments in the game, and the fact that it's paired with cheerful music makes it unforgettable. Up next we get Gus. He was Sam's other son, Edith's uncle. He was a rebellious teen who hated authority, hated rules, and refused to participate in his father's wedding. His story plays out during the reception. He's off flying a kite while a storm is rolling in. Visually, this one is striking. The wind picks up, the kite swoops higher and higher, tents flap, chaos builds. I expected it to end in lightning or a tornado sucking him up, something big and dramatic. Instead, a tent just blows over and crushes him. And again, I couldn't help but laugh. Not because Gus's death wasn't sad, although it kind of wasn't, but because the climax was so absurd. This rebellious kid gets taken out by a runaway wedding tent. Like, that's how he goes? And yet, that's the Finch curse in a nutshell. Not necessarily grand or epic, just strange and unexpected. Around this point, we start to piece together more about Edith's mom, Dawn. After Sam's death, she eventually marries an Indian man. They have 3 kids, Lewis, Milton, and me, Edith. But then her husband dies young. Left alone, she brings the kids back to the Finch house, which just feeds into that whole cycle of the curse swallowing the family again. It's quick, it's background, but it adds this layer to Dawn that isn't just the mom. She's someone who tried to escape, who tried to carve her own life, and ended up dragged back into the family legacy anyway. Then we get to Milton, Edith's brother, and his story is probably the shortest of them all. It's just a little flipbook animation. He opens a magical door and vanishes with no explanation. That's it. It's strange because it feels like a non-ending, but I found out also that it's a wink to the players who know Giant Sparrow's other game, The Unfinished Swan. Milton's disappearance is literally the setup for that. For me though, in the context of Edith Finch, it felt like a breath between tragedies. Almost like his story isn't over, it just moved somewhere else. Which is honestly a nice change of pace after everything that came before. And then we get to Edith's older brother, Lewis. This is the section that stuck with me the most. Not just because of the way it's designed, but because of how much I related to it. Lewis works at a fish cannery, and when I say he works, I mean he does the most mind-numbing repetitive job imaginable. He takes a fish, puts it under a blade to chop the head off, and tosses it onto the line. Over and over. That's it. That's his whole day. And the game makes you do it. You grab a fish, cut it, throw it. Grab, cut, throw, over and over. It's boring, it's mechanical, and it starts to fade into the background. Which is exactly the point. Because while you're doing that with the mouse, the game slowly introduces something else with the keyboard. At first, it's just a little daydream with Lewis imagining a tiny space he can walk around in while he works. And then that space grows. The more you keep chopping fish with your mouse hand, the bigger and more elaborate his fantasy becomes for you to explore with your keyboard hand. And suddenly you're doing 2 things at once. With your left hand you're walking around through this fantastical world filled with castles, ships, and kingdoms, while with your right hand you're still chopping fish over and over, barely even noticing it anymore. It's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time, but with existential dread layered on top. The more the fantasy grows, the more Lewis fades into it. He's crowned king, he's adored, he's living out the ultimate escapism. While in reality, his body is still standing in that factory line, doing the same mechanical motions. And like, I get it, I do. I play D&D, I write short stories, I play games, I write videos like this. I know what it's like to be stuck in something monotonous, boring, repetitive, and your brain just drifts somewhere else, somewhere better, somewhere more alive. That's what Lewis is doing. It's the ultimate form of daydreaming. But it's also dangerous, because the line between his fantasy and reality blurs completely. The game builds to this final moment where, in his head, he's walking towards his coronation as king, to be married, and he's about to be crowned. And at the exact same time in the real world, his body is guiding itself towards the cannery's fish guillotine. And then, he puts his head in. That's how Lewis dies. Decapitated by the same machine he'd been working at every day. Now, on paper, that's horrifying, but the way the game frames it, it's almost peaceful. Lewis died happy. Not in the real world, not with a fish blade. In his head, he was a king. He had everything he ever wanted. And that's where it gets complicated, because I'm not condoning what he did. I'm not saying it's okay, but the story makes you understand it. It makes you feel how someone could get so lost in their imagination completely that reality just isn't worth holding on to anymore. And that's why this is the best section of the game for me. The mechanics are brilliant. The way it forces you to split your attention, to multitask until the fantasy literally overtakes reality. And the story is relatable in a way that's uncomfortable. Like, yeah, I daydream, I imagine things, I escape, but what if I didn't come back? For Lewis, the escape became the only life worth living. And the real tragedy isn't that he died, it's that he never felt alive until he left reality behind. After Lewis's story, the game pivots back to Dawn, Edith's mom, and if you remember, she's one of the only Finches who actually lived into adulthood. She outlived the chaos, she resisted the curse longer than most, but she carried all that weight. And when we see her again here, it's in her final moments. You're holding her hand, and it's quiet, and she's gone. That scene was really sad, because Dawn had been the one trying to protect Edith the whole time. She was the skeptic, the one who refused to indulge in the stories, who just wanted to leave the house behind. And yet, she dies anyway. Not from some absurd accident or exaggerated myth, but from something natural. And in a game filled with surrealism, that quiet death was probably the heaviest of them all. But before she dies, there's Grandma Edie. She's the matriarch, the keeper of the family's mythology, the one feeding into the cursed narrative. And we learn on her last night in the house, she was mixing her meds with alcohol. By morning, after Edith and Dawn had left, Edie was gone. That detail makes me wonder, was Edie's death part of the curse? Or was it just age, poor choices, and inevitability? But more importantly, I think she wanted to go out that way. She clung to the story so fiercely that maybe she was already ready to become one herself. And then comes the reveal. Edith. She's been pregnant this whole time. The journal she's been writing, the narration we've been hearing, it's all for her unborn son, which reframes everything. Because now we realize the person walking through the house at the start of the game, the one carrying the journal, wasn't Edith at all. It was her son reading his mother's words. The entire journey through the house, through all these stories of death and memory and myth, were framed as a letter from mother to child. And Edith herself, like everyone else in the family, didn't make it. She dies giving birth. And that's where the circle closes. What remains of Edith Finch is her son and the stories she leaves behind. This is the point where everything about the curse comes into focus, because it's never clear if there's something supernatural wiping the Finches out. What is clear is that the family believes in it. They tell these stories, they pass them down, they exaggerate them, and they frame their lives and deaths through that lens. And that's where the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy comes in. If you grow up being told your family is cursed, if you grow up in a house that's literally built like a shrine to tragedy, then of course you start to live like you're doomed. You don't escape it, you internalize it. And Edith's choice to write to her son feels like the first break in that chain. She's not just preserving the curse, she's giving him the tools to see it for what it is. to see the stories, to understand them, and maybe, just maybe, to move forward without being swallowed by them. This game isn't just about how people die, it's about how we remember people, and how those stories shape the next generation. Are they cautionary tales? Are they legends? Are they curses? Or are they just what we make of them? While finalizing this script, there's one more way I've been thinking about this story, another lens to look at the Finches through, and that's obsession. Every single one of them is consumed by something that defines them so strongly that it leads them straight to their end. Molly had her hunger. It started with food, but in her dream, it spiraled into devouring anything she could get her hands on, until it literally consumed her. Odin was obsessed with building a safe home for his family, so much so that he tried to sail the entire house across the ocean, and it sank. Calvin wanted freedom, to fly, to escape gravity itself. He got it, even if it was only for a moment. Barbara chased fame. She wanted to be remembered for her scream and for her acting, but instead of playing a role in a horror story, she became the horror story. Sam lived for memories, for capturing everything through the camera, and in the end, he was so focused on framing the perfect shot that he ignored his daughter's warning. Gregory's is harder, but maybe his was simply having fun. The purity of play, the way he turned bath time into a magical world. Even as tragedy closed in, he stayed lost in it. Gus clung to rebellion. He refused to be part of the family wedding, refused to bend, and it was the storm he ignored that finally took him. Milton was all about art. His flipbook literally shows him disappearing into it, leaving this world behind for another. Lewis craved control. His job stripped him of agency, turning him into a machine. In his fantasy, he became the king, the one in control of everything. That obsession with control consumed him completely, until he gave away his real life for it. Dawn was obsessed with protection. Her whole life was about shielding Edith from the curse, and yet, in her effort to control it, she couldn't stop it. And Edie? Legacy. She was obsessed with the stories themselves, with preserving every detail of the family's history, even when that meant clinging to the idea of a curse and passing it down like an heirloom. And then there's Edith, walking through this house while 22 weeks pregnant, digging into every secret, refusing to leave anything hidden. Her obsession was the truth. She needed to know, to understand, even if it meant risking herself in the process. And if you noticed, there's one more Finch that I skipped, Walter. And honestly, his is the most complicated of them all to me. His obsession was escape? Hiding under Barbara's bed the night she was murdered, burying himself in the basement for 30 years, and finally trying to escape the house itself. But then there's the train, which I believe is symbolic for the unstoppable passage of time. Was he obsessed with escape? With fear? With preserving his life for as long as possible? I don't know. I don't have an answer yet. I think I need more time to really sit with it, but I only have so much time to work on the script before I put it out. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Walter's story isn't meant to be clean. So I'll pass this one to you for now. What do you think Walter's obsessed with? Because in the end, I think that's the through line here. Not death, not the curse, not escapism, obsession. Every Finch had something they couldn't let go of, and in the end, that's what defined them. And maybe that's why these stories stick with us, because obsession is something we all recognize. We've all had something we chase too far, something that swallows more of us than we meant to give. But the Finches, they took theirs all the way to the end. Every Finch had their obsession, their story that defined them. My obsession is telling these stories every week, whether it's my stream on Mondays or my videos like this on Friday. Next week is Undertale for its 10-year anniversary, so if you want to see that, hit subscribe. And now, because life isn't all tragedy and curses, here's something completely ridiculous. I'll see you next time.
Soldier boy up in it. Why me leaning, why me rock? Superman that, yeah, why me crank that RoboCop? Super fresh, now why me jocking on them haters, man. When I do that, soldier boy, I lean to the left and crank that thing now. I'm jocking on you.